waiting for information, so you just don't have enough information to continue. Unnecessary meetings, just endless meetings. And then, like, my pet peeve is investigating defects. So somebody thinks there may be a problem, but they're not 100% sure. And so you've got to stop what you're doing to just make sure like the problem kind of maybe happened. So all of these things would destroy developer productivity. And what we've noticed is when we mob program, while we haven't totally removed these things, a lot of the impact is significantly reduced. So I'm going to start off with multitasking as an example. In the teams that I've worked in for the last couple of years, we've used Kanban as a process for doing work. And one of the fundamentals of Kanban is limiting work in progress. And the reason that they do that is they've identified that multitasking is, like humans are extremely bad at that. In fact, many studies indicate that if you have an interruption, it can take you anywhere from 10 minutes up to get your concentration back. So imagine a day where you are just continually switching and getting interruptions. Like, that's destroying your productivity. And so in the teams that we did Kanban in, we would limit our work in progress in an attempt to limit multitasking, to limit the number of things that we're working on. And like prior to mob programming, we would do something like pair programming, and so in a team of 8, we had a work in progress limit of 6. And we thought that was a good indication because that meant we had some work on the go, but generally we were working as a group and we were working in pairs. And we just kind of like chased that work in progress limit number, and we would beat ourselves up on it every time we didn't hit it. It was an absolute pain. In that same team, when we started mob programming, I remember one day being in the stand-up after about a month or so of mobbing and just like looking up. We dropped work in progress and we said, we're not going to worry about this. I remember standing and looking up at the board and just suddenly being shocked to seeing that there was just like one thing that we were working on, and B, just how fast that thing was moving across the board. It was just flying. And so what we've noticed when we mob is we work on fewer things. When we're working on fewer things, we're actually significantly more productive. Another kind of thing we said destroys developer productivity are defects or code craft or technical debt, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the code's a mess. And for me, really, that comes down to a question of quality. Do we understand what's going on? Well, when you're working on your own, the best and the worst of you gets into the code. This is a diagram that Llewellyn Falco uses in his mob programming guidebook. And it says, we're human. We have highs and lows during the day, and when we work on our own, we get the highs and lows coming through, and that comes through. And yes, like we try to reduce the impact of that by code reviews, but the reality is that a code review is after the fact, and normally you're just trying to get through it. And so it's quite feasible that not that great quality gets through the pipe. When we work as a mob, we've got like immediate feedback. We're filtering out all the poor parts, and so only the best of us gets into the code. And that's been my experience. I've noticed that code significantly improves when we're mobbing compared to when we're working on our own. So with that said, does that mean that we're reducing costs? Like, is this a cost-effective way? Well, if you measure how long a solo development takes to start a piece of work and then get it deployed into production, I think it's actually less time than if you worked out the manpower per hour that you're paying for mob to do it. Fundamentally, I don't think you can contest that. But if that's how you're measuring it, you're measuring the wrong thing. Because it's not just the point that we deploy into production that counts. It's the defects that come after it gets into production that really cost us time. And if you start keeping that into consideration, I think there's a compelling argument that higher quality software is actually cheaper software to maintain. So with that said, well, then isn't just mob programming a really expensive way of doing pair programming? I mean, with pair programming, we get the instant feedback, we're getting much higher quality. And my experience is that pair programming does lead to a higher quality software than solo developers. But in the same vein, I also believe that mob programming leads to higher quality than pair programming. And that was just like my gut feel from empirical evidence I'd seen. So I was quite surprised to find that a study was done in 2006 on what the ideal group size was to solving complex problems. And the study was done by the American Association of Psychologists. They did it with about 800 students. And what they did is they varied the sizes to see, like, what's the sweet spot for solving complex problems. And what they found was really, really interesting. They found in groups of 2 that the group was only as clever as the cleverest person in the group. As soon as they moved to groups of 3 to 5, they noticed that the group was able to solve problems that were more complex than what the cleverest person in the group could solve. And that kind of reaffirms the empirical evidence I'm seeing from mobbing. I think when we're in those like mob-sized groups, we actually are writing better code than when we're working in pairs. And my gut feel is, like, in the type of work that we've been doing, a good sized mob is 4 plus or minus 1. So I find that anything above 6, just it's too hard to get everybody on the same page, and there's so much storming. And as soon as we start going to 3, even 3 is a bit of a push, because if somebody jumps out of a mob, like you're fundamentally back to pairing. Now with that said, there are a couple other reasons why I think mob programming has an edge over pair programming. And the one is that pair programming can be an extremely confrontational thing. I've seen developers fight over if statements, or whether indexing months should start on 1 or 0. I mean, we love this stuff. And when you just have 2 of us, it can really be personalities involved. If you have a strong personality in the pair, they can totally push over the weaker personalities or the less confrontational personalities. Whereas when we work as a mob, we have that majority, and it just makes it a lot less confrontational. So yes, I might not agree with what you said, but we're going to go where the group wants to go. We're going to go with the majority. And if I'm the individual and I can't motivate why this is a better idea or a better approach, well, then maybe it's equivalent. Maybe I need to work on my motivations better. So I found that mob programming is substantially less confrontational as pair programming, provided you treat people with kindness, consideration, and respect. Another thing that I've noticed with mob programming is increased flow. So with pair programming, if you're working on a story and somebody needs to go to a meeting, the pair stops, like work stops. Whereas with mob programming, because you have some redundancy, if people want to leave and join, that's fine. They just do it. So if I need to stretch my legs for 5 minutes and I'm in the mob, I'll just let them know. I'm just going for a quick walk, I'll be back now. And the work just carries on. In that video I showed you in the very beginning, you'll see that people were organically leaving and rejoining the mob. And literally, the work just carries on flowing. And for me, that's like a really, really strong attribute of mob programming. And the most important thing is work done all the time, getting closer to completion. The last thing I kind of want to talk about before we get to questions and dining is this concept of waiting for information. Now, we have a saying in mob programming that if you're not able to answer your own questions, you're missing somebody in the mob. And I remember the experience I had on a project that we were working for in a financial institution that kind of illustrates this in a nice way. Now, previously, before on this particular project we were working, if we was quite a complex domain, and so if we needed some information, we would book a meeting with the domain expert. They would come meet with us the next day. They would give us the information we'd need, and then we'd carry on working. We'd find out often that, oh, we missed something, or there's something they forgot to mention, and then we'd need to book another meeting with them, which would involve another day of waiting because they already had their days booked up, and it was just an absolute pain. So we tried an experiment in our MYOB, and we said, well, we have this domain expert. Instead of booking a meeting, we just booked time at the mobbing station, which is our whole computer setup. And that person came, they sat down with us. They couldn't read code, but they understood the problem. And we were translating what we were seeing in the code to the problem that they were trying to solve. We sat there for an hour. We identified the initial stuff, but throughout that hour, we identified additional things. And the amazing thing was, at the end of that hour, we'd actually finished solving that problem, committed it, pushed it through to our CI, and by the end of the day, it was in production. And that business person was just blown away. What previously had taken days, if not weeks, we had killed in an hour. So waiting for information is a big productivity impactor. And if you are working in a MYOB environment, you just have so much more information to work with. With that, I kind of want to end off with a last experience and insight we gained from doing MYOB programming over the last 6 months in our team, and that's physical setup matters. When we started MYOB programming in Auckland, we booked a meeting room, and the first day was great. Everybody wanted to MYOB program, and we mobbed the whole day, and it was perfect, and we were seeing great progress, and everybody was really excited. And then the next day, we booked another meeting room, and first of all, it was a bit of a walk to the meeting room. Then you had to get set up, and then it wasn't feeling like a bit of work. And by day 4 or 5, people start booking the meeting rooms that you were planning on, so then you start moving from room to room, and it just became an absolute nightmare. And after about 2 weeks of trying, we just gave up. It wasn't until we had moved the MYOB station into our work environment where we already worked that we suddenly started to see this uptake in MYOB programming. And what we've discovered is, like, having a comfortable physical setup matters. Now, in this slide, this is not our mobbing station. We're not this far yet. This is a team based in the US at Hunters. Hunters does irrigation equipment, and you can see that they've got big screens, so everybody can see what's going on. They've also got lots of space. Everybody's comfortably seated. Nobody's feeling cramped. And this is their working environment. And interestingly enough, at Hunters, they're now up to 12 mobs that work like this day in and day out. And they're seeing a massive return. So investing in the physical setup, if you start seeing traction with MYOB programming and you see value, I really recommend that you start motivating to get the right equipment to make your practice more sustainable. I'd like to end off with a question, which is, what are we going to be doing in the next 10, 15 years? Will technology progress to a point where our interactions in a co-located way can be equivalent to being distributed? Will VR reach that point? What is the next step beyond MYOB programming? And I'm really excited to find out. The mantra that we have when we talk about MYOB programming is, if you're doing the same thing you were doing a year ago, you're doing it wrong. Like, we should be continually reevaluating and looking for opportunities to improve. And with that, I really want to thank you for attending the session. I think I've got time maybe for 1 or 2 questions if there are any.
So firstly, in terms of productivity, I went to a presentation by Woody, and he basically said this is a stack of cards that we did as a team individually, pairs, and this is the stack as a mob in the same period. So it was pretty easy to compare. So the second thing is a question. we have people that like developers who work from home on the occasion. So how does that fit in with mob programming? How do they?
Okay, so working, like if you're working remotely, look, it's tough. In our team, we haven't done remote mobbing, and we haven't tried that because we thought that we just wanted to get the co-located working before we tried remote. I know of teams that work this way in a remote environment, and they set up their environment to make it possible, and it is possible provided you use specific tools. But I don't have experience doing that, unfortunately. Yes.
So you have the setup because you already have all that involved during the day. Do you still have a normal setup?
Okay, so the question is, do we still do a stand-up because we have everybody working on the stuff through the day? So, in all the mobs that I've been involved with, we still do a stand-up, and the reason we do that is, I think, largely to link to the environment we have. I think it would be different if we had our own mobbing room that was dedicated, but because we had a shared office environment, and we have people that need to know what's going on, we do a stand-up. What I have noticed with the stand-ups when we're mobbing, because we're only working on one thing, the stand-ups are substantially short, and it's not a discussion about implementation, because we're going to get that discussion while we're working. It's more just getting an idea of what's coming up next and the progress that we're having on our current stuff. So we still do stand-ups, but they are significantly shorter, and they're typically just focused on one or two things. Maybe take one more question, if there are any. Yes.
Mark, if you had a team of, say, 8
Okay, so good question. If you had a team of 8, would you run 2 mobs, or would you run one big one? To be honest, if I had a team of 8, I'd probably run 1 mob and 1 pair. And the reason I say that is a team of 8, generally somebody is sick most of the time, so that brings you down to 7, right? Then there are ad hoc investigations that need to happen, so normally have somebody working on those things and just focusing on giving the rest of the team an opportunity to do, which then leaves me with 6 devs, and I can go 3-3 or 4-2 or something like that. So it really depends. There's no set way. The previous organization we were in, we ran 2 mobs successfully, simultaneously, and we actually used it as a way to get alignments. So we typically mob as a group for a week, and then people from the one mob, 1 or 2 of them would move to the other mob, and 1 or 2 of them would move back. And so we always had enough context in that mob to keep going. It wasn't like a reset, but then we had cross-share of knowledge across mobs as well. So there are a couple of ways of doing it. Okay, well, one last one.
You mentioned there were BA and QA are also part of the mob, or they just invited them immediately?
Okay, so does it?
It wasn't BA.
Yeah. So we get massive value from our BA and from our QA, and while we believe that testing is a responsibility of the team, we're getting value from other things that they're doing. So generally the BA is not going to be in the mob all the time, but they're going to be available that when we're working on the problem and we need some additional information that they can just join in. With the QA side, the QA joins the mob and leaves the mob and is in the mob a lot more than the BA is generally, but not in the whole time right now. That's the way we do it. I don't know, does anybody have other experiences with that? Good. Well, then that's how you should do it. Thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate your...
Another question. So, because it's developers, so sometimes you go and read stuff, you get this record or some articles, you spend a lot of time on that. When I did Python programming, I felt like you got robbed of that time. Because all this coding, you don't have time to sharpen the sword. You need to increase your skills in more programming. It could be a lack of that. If you need something, you always programming, you don't have time to.
Okay, so what I'll do is anybody that wants to go can go. Don't feel like you're compelled to be here, and I'll carry on. Because Because that's a really important question. So, kind of like our daily workflow is we get in the office between 8 and 8:30. We have stand-up at about 9:30, and we take lunch from 12:30 to 1:30. So generally before stand-up, we work on our own, we do our own things. We are doing investigations, we're reading books, we are learning, we're sometimes doing refactorings, whatever. We're investing time in sharpening the saw as individuals. When we're there to like mob, we're there to mob. Like we're going to work together because we know we're very effective working that way. And then kind of after 4 o'clock, it's up to people. Like some people come in early, so they leave early, and other people come in just before stand-up, and so they leave later. And so there's a bit of time on each end where people can get improvement. Now, is that the best way of working? Like, should we be learning all the time as individuals? Like, I think we have a responsibility to deliver, and so getting that balance right is tough. But it's really, for me, it's worked well having that time in the morning and the afternoon to still sharpen the saw, but also know that we have some time allocated as a group where we're not going to do that, so we can work together. Are there any other questions? Did that answer it, Alex?
Yeah, it's sort of dedicated time slot for it. But while you're mobbing, like we found that there is a like WebSocket. If you guys don't know WebSocket, so you have to jump and read on that while you're mobbing, like how.
Yeah. So there's.
And do some spikes. Do you do spikes while you're mobbing? Like if you need to do spike this.
Yeah. So remember the model that I said we default to collaboration?
Yeah.
So there will be times when it's more than appropriate to work as a pair and go do a spike and then bring it back to the mob. That's no issue. There'll be times when it's more than appropriate to work on your own. We're not going to dictate to people that you will work this way all the time. We just find that this is a useful way for kind of getting work moving forward. So I don't have a problem doing a spike as a mob. We've done that before. It's been very, very useful. It just really depends on the situation.
About investigation, you don't do it more.
Investigation?
Yeah, you're saying you're also outsourcing it, like you guys go and investigate this issue.
Yeah, so that's an approach our team has taken where we have one person that's basically absorbing all the interruptions that the team normally has and doing that for us. If they uncover some sort of complexity, they'll often bring it to the mob. But a lot of the investigations we do, it's quite simple to figure out, and we found it's been productive doing it. Anything else? Great. Well, thanks guys. Thanks for coming.